The Gospel of Thomas holds within it 114 sayings that are credited to Jesus Christ. However, for close to 2,000 years, this text lay concealed beneath the Egyptian desert, while the Christian church branded it as heretical. What led to its burial? What mysteries lie within its pages? Today, we're going to explore the full account of this disputed text, tracing its path from enigmatic beginnings through its stunning rediscovery to the fierce discussions it has sparked among academics and faithful followers. If this is your first time here, please think about tapping that like button and subscribing if you haven't done so yet. Your encouragement allows us to create more videos like this one, examining lesser-known religious texts alongside narrating well-loved classics to aid your relaxation or unwinding. Additionally, share with us your location and current time. We're cultivating a community right here, giving you the chance to connect with others who share similar interests from across the globe in the comments below. So, with that said, let's begin our journey, shall we? The Egyptian desert conceals mysteries within its ever-shifting sands. During December of 1945, a young farm worker named Muhammad al-Samon traversed the dusty terrain close to the settlement of Nag Hammadi. His household required fertilizer for their agricultural fields. The ancient rock formations lining the Nile River frequently contained deposits of sabak, nutrient-rich soil ideal for cultivating vegetables. Muhammad wielded a basic mattock, a tool for farming that had been smoothed by countless years of labor. He made his way toward a boulder resting against the stony cliff face. This particular location seemed unusual somehow. The earth appeared softer here, more full of promise. He started digging. His implement hit something solid, and then once more. The noise reverberated strangely through the arid atmosphere. Muhammad brushed away additional soil, exposing the rounded rim of a sizable clay vessel. This container measured roughly 2 feet in height, closed with a substantial lid. Markings from ancient times adorned its exterior, etched by hands that had labored many centuries prior to his own existence. Apprehension and fascination battled within Muhammad's thoughts. Regional folklore told of jinn, supernatural beings dwelling within aged containers. Breaking open such vessels might invite dreadful misfortune. Yet, the jar could also hold riches, golden coins capable of altering his family's circumstances. The concrete necessity for funds overcame old, superstitious beliefs. Muhammad lifted his mattock overhead and struck downward with force. The jar broke apart, discharging a plume of dust that had remained imprisoned for more than 1,500 years. Rather than gold, he discovered bundles of ancient papyrus, secured in leather coverings and enclosed in fabric. The sheets appeared delicate, seemingly prepared to disintegrate at the slightest contact. The farm worker experienced disappointment. These aged, yellowed pages held no value for him. He lacked the ability to decipher the unfamiliar characters covering each surface. Certain pages displayed symbols entirely unknown to his eyes. Others revealed illustrations of circles and crosses that appeared to throb with concealed significance. Muhammad collected the books regardless. His mother utilized old paper for igniting fires when preparing meals. These ancient documents could fulfill the same function. He bundled the materials within his garment and transported them to his dwelling, following the identical route his forebears had walked across generations. Upon arriving home, Muhammad's mother inspected the puzzling books. She perceived potential kindling for her cooking flames. Multiple pages vanished into the fire that same evening, their inscriptions transforming into smoke and cinders. Ancient knowledge, safeguarded across centuries of obscurity, fueled the flames that heated a modest dinner. Yet destiny stepped in through human avarice. A nearby trader caught wind of rumors regarding Muhammad's find. Information circulated throughout the village that the farm worker had unearthed something old and potentially precious. The merchant proposed purchasing the surviving books, intending to market them within Cairo's trade in antiquities. Muhammad welcomed the proposition, pleased to convert worthless paper into actual currency. The trader packaged the codices with care and commenced the northward trek. He sensed these documents possessed greater value than the humble farmer comprehended. Within Cairo, dealers scrutinized the books with increasing enthusiasm. The papyrus appeared genuine, authentically ancient. The manner of writing indicated remarkable age. One after another, the books started appearing within the murky realm of antiquities commerce. Academics glimpsed portions of pages that appeared to house early Christian writings. Stories circulated through scholarly networks about a collection of manuscripts capable of transforming historical understanding. The Egyptian authorities, grasping the potential significance of these findings, initiated attempts to recover the dispersed volumes. Some books journeyed outside Egypt's boundaries before government officials could intervene. Private collectors and institutions obtained individual codices, each representing one fragment of a greater whole. The scattered collection that had rested undisturbed in the desert across centuries now found itself separated across multiple continents, its wholeness fractured by human desire and scholarly rivalry. The site where Muhammad made his discovery transformed into a destination for researchers. They examined the cliff surface, hunting for evidence regarding who had concealed these writings and for what reason. The desert winds persisted in sweeping across the terrain, bearing murmurs of ancient mysteries that had awaited patiently for their time of disclosure. In subsequent years, specialists would comprehend the genuine scale of Muhammad's chance discovery. He had revealed one of the 20th century's most significant archaeological findings. However, on that December day in 1945, he remained simply a young farm worker searching for fertilizer, oblivious that his mattock had just encountered a treasure surpassing gold in value. The desert had preserved its mysteries admirably, shielding them through conquests, religious turmoil, and time's gradual progression. Now these voices from antiquity would communicate once more, transmitting messages from an era when Christianity appeared vastly different from its eventual form. The absent gospel. The papyrus bundles that Muhammad al-Saman uncovered held 52 distinct texts composed in Coptic, the tongue of ancient Egypt's Christian populations. Academics who studied these manuscripts understood they possessed something remarkable. These weren't simply any aged books. They represented early Christian compositions that had vanished from historical record for beyond a millennium. Within the leather-bound codices, one particular text emerged with striking force. It opened with straightforward words destined to disturb the foundations of biblical research. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke and which Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down. The initial sentence immediately indicated that this book asserted direct linkage to Jesus himself. The text that ensued appeared unlike anything researchers had encountered previously. Most Gospels recounted narratives about Jesus, portraying his journeys, his wonders, and his exchanges with followers. This manuscript contained no narratives whatsoever. Rather, it offered 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, each one preceded by the statement, "Jesus said." Dr. Jean Dorès, a French academic operating in Egypt, numbered among the first to acknowledge the importance of this specific text. He examined the opening passages and sensed the foundation shifting under his feet. Could this genuinely be another gospel? The document asserted to preserve the genuine words of Jesus, recorded by someone identifying himself as Thomas. The academic community responded with both excitement and dispute. Scholarly gatherings erupted into passionate arguments. Certain investigators proposed that this writing, now termed the Gospel of Thomas, might genuinely preserve Jesus' utterances more faithfully than the canonical Gospels. Others rejected it as a subsequent fabrication developed by heretical organizations to validate their own theological positions. Thomas's format bewildered everyone. The canonical Gospels integrated Jesus' teachings within narratives about his existence and demise. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all organized their reports around the crucifixion and resurrection. Thomas disregarded these occurrences completely, concentrating exclusively on mysterious sayings that appeared to indicate hidden spiritual realities. Numerous sayings within Thomas resonated with biblical researchers. Some mirrored verses appearing in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Others reflected the theoretical Q source, an assemblage of Jesus' sayings that academics believed the gospel authors had employed as reference material. However, Thomas also featured sayings appearing nowhere else within early Christian writings. The recognizable sayings offered both reassurance and bewilderment. When Thomas quoted Jesus stating, "Blessed are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven," researchers identified the relationship to the Sermon on the Mount. Yet Thomas frequently presented these familiar expressions in unusual new frameworks, encircled by cryptic declarations that appeared to originate from an entirely distinct spiritual reality. The unfamiliar sayings presented even greater challenges. Thomas quoted Jesus expressing thoughts such as, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." These words sounded meaningful yet enigmatic, absent the transparent moral direction that distinguished much of Jesus' instruction in the canonical Gospels. Church authorities reacted to Thomas with profound mistrust. The writing appeared to advance a variation of Christianity that circumvented conventional religious power. Where the canonical Gospels highlighted Jesus' position as Redeemer and the significance of believing in his death and resurrection, Thomas concentrated on interior spiritual awareness and individual metamorphosis. The theological ramifications troubled numerous believers. If Thomas genuinely preserved Jesus' authentic words, then traditional Christianity might have overlooked fundamental dimensions of his communication. The text indicated that salvation arrived through comprehending hidden realities, rather than through confidence in Jesus' sacrificial demise. This viewpoint endangered core Christian teachings that had directed believers for nearly 2 millennia. Educational institutions discovered themselves positioned between scholarly inquisitiveness and religious influence. Universities housing theological schools confronted challenging questions about examining texts that contested orthodox conviction. Certain academics pursued their investigations discreetly, releasing their discoveries in specialized publications that few individuals accessed. Others welcomed the dispute, utilizing Thomas to advocate for fundamental reinterpretations of Christian history. Thomas's discovery compelled researchers to address uncomfortable inquiries about Christianity's evolution. If this writing genuinely originated in the 1st or 2nd century, as numerous specialists concluded, then early Christianity had been considerably more varied than previously envisioned. The unified faith, emerging from church assemblies and declarations, might have represented merely one possibility among numerous competing interpretations of Jesus' communication. Collections and institutions competed to obtain segments of the Nag Hammadi library, including reproductions of Thomas. Each organization desired to possess texts capable of recomposing religious history. The Jung Codex, which housed a complete reproduction of Thomas, became a treasure contested by academics, collectors, and national authorities. The Gospel of Thomas had surfaced from the Egyptian desert, transporting questions destined to reshape biblical research. Its straightforward format concealed intricate theological challenges that persist in affecting religious consideration today. The writings, commencing with an assertion about secret sayings, had truly disclosed secrets, though they were secrets concerning the variety and intricacy of early Christian belief. Thomas, the twin, the individual who asserted to have transcribed Jesus' secret sayings, possessed a name revealing his enigmatic character. Didymus Judas Thomas bore 3 designations, each bearing its own meaning. Thomas signified twin in Aramaic, whereas Didymus signified twin in Greek. Both names indicated the identical identity. This apostle became known as the twin, though historical records never definitively identified whose twin he was meant to be. The New Testament portrays Thomas as an intricate character, recalled chiefly for his renowned skepticism about Jesus' resurrection. When the remaining disciples asserted to have witnessed the risen Jesus, Thomas insisted upon physical verification. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." This instance of doubt secured him the enduring designation Doubting Thomas. Yet Thomas's biblical presences disclose more than simple skepticism. Within the Gospel of John, he displayed exceptional bravery when Jesus chose to return to Judea despite threats on his life. While other disciples voiced apprehension, Thomas proclaimed, "Let us also go that we may die with him." This declaration exposed an individual prepared to confront peril alongside his instructor, even when the route forward appeared fatal. The identical Gospel of John documented another meaningful instance when Thomas posed Jesus a direct inquiry about spiritual subjects. Jesus had been discussing preparing a location for his followers, mentioning they understood the path to where he was departing. Thomas replied with genuine bewilderment, "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" This question elicited Jesus to articulate one of his most celebrated declarations, "I am the way and the truth and the life." Outside the biblical reports, Thomas's narrative expanded through various apocryphal writings and ancient customs. The Acts of Thomas, a 3rd century manuscript, depicted him as a missionary who journeyed to India for spreading Christianity. Per this report, Thomas initially resisted undertaking the expedition, but Jesus manifested to him in a vision and persuaded him to proceed. The Indian relationship proved especially fascinating because historical confirmation indicates that Christian populations did flourish in India throughout the initial few centuries following Jesus' death. The St. Thomas Christians of Kerala attribute their beginnings to the apostles' missionary efforts, preserving customs that link them directly to Thomas's preaching. Archaeological confirmation from southern India encompasses ancient crosses and markings that validate the likelihood of early Christian existence in the territory. Thomas's connection with India assumed particular importance when examined alongside the Gospel of Thomas. The texts focus on interior spiritual awareness and mystical encounter, harmonized with Indian philosophical customs. Certain academics propose that Thomas's alleged missionary activity in India might have shaped his comprehension of Jesus' teachings, resulting in the distinctive spiritual outlook discovered in the Gospel bearing his designation. The matter of Thomas's identity grew even more intricate when certain ancient writings implied he might have been Jesus' twin brother. The Gospel of Thomas itself commences by recognizing the author as Didymus Judas Thomas, and certain researchers observed that this name configuration could suggest a familial bond. If Thomas was truly Jesus' twin, then his assertion to safeguard Jesus' secret sayings would possess special credibility. Early Christian populations maintained conflicted sentiments about Thomas's heritage. Orthodox congregations honored his eventual faith following touching Jesus' wounds, but they remained dubious of writings asserting to preserve his independent teachings. The Gospel of Thomas and other compositions linked with Thomas frequently advanced varieties of Christianity that emphasized individual spiritual encounter over institutional power. The geographical distribution of Thomas Christianity demonstrated remarkable scope. Communities asserting Thomas as their establisher manifested not solely in India, but additionally in Syria, Mesopotamia, and other territories of the Middle East. These communities frequently cultivated distinctive theological outlooks that varied from the Christianity emerging in the Roman Empire. Thomas's persona in the Gospel of Thomas differs substantially from his representation in the canonical Gospels. Rather than the doubting disciple requiring physical verification, Thomas surfaces as a spiritual pursuer who grasped Jesus' deeper instructions. The text portrays him as someone capable of acknowledging Jesus' genuine character, proclaiming in one saying, "Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like." The historical Thomas remains somewhat enigmatic, a character positioned between biblical reports and subsequent legendary elaborations. The canonical Gospels portray him as a contemplative yet doubtful disciple who eventually discovered faith through direct encounter. The apocryphal customs convert him into a missionary champion who transported Christianity to remote territories and safeguarded Jesus' most meaningful teachings. Whether Thomas genuinely composed the Gospel of Thomas remains a debated question among researchers. The writing might have been credited to him by subsequent communities desiring to assert apostolic legitimacy for their distinctive teachings. However, the connection between Thomas and esoteric spiritual awareness proved lasting, shaping Christian mystical customs across centuries. The designation Thomas the Twin continues to summon mystery and spiritual profundity. His heritage encompasses both the sincere doubt that guided to stronger faith and the pursuit for hidden wisdom that typified early Christian mysticism. Within the desert sands of Egypt, the Gospel, carrying his name, awaited patiently to remind the world that the apostle, recognized for his doubt, was likewise remembered for his distinctive perception into Jesus' most secret teachings. The terrain of early Christianity. The world producing the Gospel of Thomas resembled little the consolidated Christianity destined to surface centuries afterward. During the 1st and 2nd centuries following Jesus' death, his adherents dispersed throughout the Mediterranean world, bearing different understandings of his communication. Each community cultivated its own comprehension of what following Jesus signified, fashioning a mosaic of convictions that would eventually fragment under orthodoxy's pressure. The earliest Christian populations possessed no central power to establish correct conviction. Paul's epistles, composed merely decades following Jesus' death, already exposed substantial disagreements among believers. Certain groups stressed Jesus' Jewish ancestry and demanded that converts must observe Jewish law. Others, shaped by Paul's instruction, received Gentiles without mandating circumcision or dietary limitations. Still others concentrated on mystical encounters and secret awareness that guaranteed direct connection to divine reality. Within Alexandria, Egypt, Christian intellectuals interacted with Greek philosophy, fashioning sophisticated theological frameworks that combined biblical instruction with Platonic consideration. These academics generated refined clarifications of how Jesus could exist as both human and divine, establishing groundwork for subsequent Orthodox teaching. However, they likewise investigated concepts that would ultimately be characterized as heretical, encompassing the prospect that Jesus had disclosed different degrees of reality to different disciples. Syrian Christianity evolved along different trajectories, frequently emphasizing ascetic disciplines and mystical encounter. Communities within this territory generated writings that characterized Jesus as a spiritual instructor who presented freedom from the material realm. The Gospel of Thomas, composed in Greek but safeguarded in Coptic, probably emerged in this theological atmosphere where Jesus' sayings were valued as instruments to spiritual metamorphosis. Gnostic populations surfaced across the Mediterranean, though they opposed straightforward categorization. These organizations generally maintained that the material realm was imperfect or malevolent, fashioned by a lesser deity rather than the authentic God. They instructed that Jesus had arrived to disclose secret awareness that would permit souls to flee the confinement of physical being. Gnostic writings frequently characterized Jesus as a heavenly revealer who seemed human but transcended ordinary physical constraints. Early Christianity's variety mirrored the wider cultural intricacy of the Roman realm. Jewish populations preserved their own understandings of Jesus' importance, frequently regarding him as an instructor or prophet rather than a divine character. Pagan philosophers discovered certain Christian concepts attractive, especially teachings about the soul's bond to the divine. Mystery religions presented competing visions of salvation through ceremonial initiation and mystical encounter. Rome itself transformed into a vital battleground for different Christian groups. The city's Christian population incorporated believers from diverse backgrounds, each contributing their own theological outlooks. House congregations, distributed throughout the city, frequently cultivated distinctive disciplines and teachings. Certain emphasized Jesus' position as a sacrifice for transgression, whereas others concentrated on his moral teachings or his guarantee of spiritual metamorphosis. Early Christianity's theological marketplace produced constant discussion and periodic conflict. Leaders surfaced who asserted special power to understand Jesus' communication, but their assertions frequently remained unacknowledged by other populations. Bishops in significant cities like Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch commenced to claim wider influence, yet their power remained restricted to their immediate territories. Travel and communication networks permitted different Christian organizations to engage, but these links frequently intensified tension rather than unity. Correspondence circulated between populations, occasionally bearing cautions about deceptive instructors or hazardous concepts. The identical networks that distributed Christian faith likewise transported theological conflicts that would ultimately fragment the movement into competing groups. Christian text production intensified during this era of variety. Communities fashioned gospels, acts, epistles, and apocalypses that validated their specific theological outlooks. The Gospel of Thomas surfaced from this creative surge, presenting a vision of Jesus that highlighted interior spiritual awareness over external religious compliance. Economic and social elements likewise molded early Christian evolution. Prosperous sponsors backed different instructors and populations, occasionally shaping theological trajectory through their financial support. Craftspeople and traders transported Christian concepts along commercial routes, establishing networks of believers who possessed occupational connections alongside religious dedication. Persecution by Roman powers influenced different Christian populations in diverse manners. Certain groups cultivated theologies that celebrated martyrdom, whereas others highlighted the significance of conserving secret teachings for future generations. The Gospel of Thomas, with its concentration on hidden awareness, might have attracted populations requiring to hide their convictions from antagonistic powers. The intellectual atmosphere of the 2nd century demonstrated especially productive for Christian ingenuity. Philosophers like Justin Martyr sought to establish Christianity's harmony with Greek consideration, whereas others like Irenaeus labored to create distinct boundaries between orthodox and heretical instruction. These attempts would ultimately generate the formation of official declarations and canonical scriptures. However, in the interim, Christian expression's variety persisted in thriving. Women fulfilled meaningful positions in numerous early Christian populations, occasionally functioning as instructors, prophets, or leaders. The Gospel of Thomas incorporates sayings that reference Mary Magdalene and other women, though these allusions frequently demonstrate ambiguity about women's spiritual condition. Different communities possessed varying perspectives about gender positions, contributing another dimension of intricacy to the early Christian terrain. The world generating the Gospel of Thomas represented a world of spiritual experimentation and theological inventiveness. Communities competed to safeguard and understand Jesus' genuine communication, frequently generating writings that asserted apostolic legitimacy for their distinctive teachings. This abundant variety would ultimately surrender to institutional consolidation, but not before producing a remarkable assemblage of early Christian literature that persists in challenging and motivating readers today. Sayings in contrast to stories. The Gospel of Thomas portrays Jesus in a manner that appears nearly foreign to individuals familiar with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Where the canonical Gospels recount narratives about Jesus' existence, Thomas presents solely his words. This variation in structure mirrors two entirely different methods for safeguarding and presenting Jesus' importance. The canonical Gospels pursue a narrative configuration that biblical researchers term a biographical gospel. These writings portray Jesus' birth, his ministry, his encounters with various individuals, and ultimately his death and resurrection. The narratives supply framework for Jesus' teachings, demonstrating how his words responded to particular situations and difficulties. When Jesus communicates in these Gospels, readers comprehend his significance through the circumstances that stimulated his reply. Thomas rejects this narrative method completely. The writing comprises 114 sayings, each presented with the straightforward statement, Jesus said. No narratives link these sayings to specific occurrences or exchanges. No portrayals clarify where Jesus existed when he expressed these words or why he selected to communicate them. The sayings exist independently, suspended free from the biographical particulars that secure the canonical Gospels. This structure positions Thomas in a classification that researchers designate a sayings gospel. The theoretical Q source, which numerous academics trust, supplied common material for Matthew and Luke, probably pursued a comparable configuration. Ancient Jewish and Greek literature incorporated assemblages of wise sayings credited to renowned instructors, and early Christian populations evidently fashioned similar collections of Jesus' words. The saying structure fulfills a different objective than narrative biography. Narratives about Jesus tend to highlight his distinctive identity and his historical importance. They portray him as a character who executed miracles, satisfied prophecies, and achieved salvation through his death and resurrection. Individuals reading these narratives learn about Jesus as someone who operated in history to alter the human circumstance. Sayings assemblages, in opposition, concentrate on Jesus as an instructor whose words possess transformative capacity. They portray him as someone who grasped spiritual reality and could transmit that comprehension to others. Individuals reading these assemblages learn from Jesus rather than about him, encountering his teachings as timeless wisdom transcending particular historical situations. The Gospel of Thomas appears intentionally constructed to highlight Jesus' position as a wisdom instructor. Numerous sayings assume the structure of proverbs, puzzles, or contradictions that invite contemplation rather than conviction. Jesus communicates in metaphors and symbols that necessitate understanding, presenting perceptions that disclose their significance progressively rather than immediately. This method to Jesus' teachings mirrors a specific comprehension of spiritual metamorphosis. The canonical Gospels generally portray salvation as something Jesus achieved for humanity through his death and resurrection. Believers obtain this salvation by recognizing Jesus as their Redeemer and pursuing his moral teachings. Thomas proposes a different route, one demanding individuals to uncover spiritual reality through their own interior investigation. The saying structure likewise permits different degrees of significance. A single saying might present practical wisdom for daily existence, while simultaneously indicating toward deeper spiritual realities. Advanced individuals could discover meaningful mystical perceptions in the identical words that beginners might understand as straightforward moral direction. This stratified method to significance rendered sayings assemblages especially valuable for populations that highlighted spiritual cultivation across time. Oral custom fulfilled a vital position in the conservation and transmission of Jesus' sayings. Prior to written Gospels existing, Christian populations preserved Jesus' teachings through memory and repetition. Sayings proved easier to memorize than extended narratives, and they could be modified to different situations while preserving their fundamental significance. The Gospel of Thomas might safeguard certain of these oral customs in their original structure. The bond between sayings and narratives in early Christianity demonstrates intricacy. Certain sayings in Thomas seem to be removed from narrative frameworks discovered in the canonical Gospels. Others appear to signify independent customs that never transformed into part of the biographical reports. Still others might be subsequent formations cultivated by populations desiring to broaden Jesus' instruction to address new spiritual inquiries. The theological consequences of selecting sayings over narratives extend outside questions of literary structure. Narrative Gospels tend to highlight Jesus' distinctiveness and his position as the exclusive route to salvation. Sayings Gospels can be understood to indicate that Jesus represented one among numerous wisdom instructors, albeit an especially talented one. This variation in portrayal contributed to subsequent theological discussions about Jesus' divine character and his bond to other religious characters. The Gospel of Thomas complicates these separations by periodically incorporating sayings that claim Jesus' distinctive identity. He communicates of himself as the light over all things and asserts that whoever is near me is near the fire. These declarations propose divine condition while preserving the saying structure that highlights his position as an instructor of wisdom. Contemporary individuals frequently discover the sayings structure both demanding and attractive. The absence of narrative framework compels individuals to interact with Jesus' words directly, without the direction supplied by narrative structures. This can generate bewilderment about significance, but it can likewise establish space for individual understanding and spiritual exploration. The Gospel of Thomas establishes that early Christian populations experimented with different methods of safeguarding and portraying Jesus' importance. The selection between sayings and narratives mirrored different theological priorities and spiritual disciplines. Communities valuing mystical encounter and individual metamorphosis might have favored sayings assemblages, whereas those highlighting historical faith and communal worship might have preferred narrative gospels. Thomas's survival alongside the canonical Gospels reminds us that early Christianity encompassed multiple methods to comprehending Jesus' communication. The sayings structure presents a glimpse into varieties of Christian spirituality that highlighted interior awareness and individual metamorphosis over historical faith and institutional power. These different methods to Jesus' teachings persist in shaping Christian consideration and discipline today. Hidden significances. The Gospel of Thomas communicates in puzzles and contradictions that appear constructed to perplex as much as they illuminate. Jesus' words within this writing frequently resemble koans from Zen Buddhism, mysterious declarations that oppose straightforward understanding. This enigmatic quality mirrors an intentional teaching approach that highlights exploration over clarification. The writing commences with a guarantee and a caution. Whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. This beginning immediately indicates that the sayings harbor hidden significances that must be decoded through attentive examination and spiritual perception. The guarantee of immortality for those who comprehend proposes that the hidden significances encompass meaningful spiritual realities rather than straightforward moral direction. Numerous sayings in Thomas utilize paradox as an instructional instrument. Jesus proclaims the first will be last, and they will become one and the same. This declaration inverts normal anticipations about social arrangement while suggesting at a deeper spiritual reality where conventional separations forfeit their significance. The paradox compels individuals to look outside surface significances to uncover what Jesus might have meant. The theme of spiritual perception courses throughout the writing. Jesus communicates repeatedly about seeing, knowing, and comprehending, yet always in manners that transcend ordinary awareness. He informs his disciples, "There is light within a man of light, and he lights up the whole world. If he does not shine, he is darkness." This saying proposes that spiritual illumination encompasses discovering an interior source of divine radiance that most individuals never acknowledge. The Gospel of Thomas portrays a vision of spirituality that highlights self-knowledge as the route to salvation. Jesus proclaims, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This mysterious declaration proposes that salvation relies on acknowledging and manifesting some interior spiritual reality, rather than on external religious compliance. The writing's method to the kingdom of God departs dramatically from the canonical Gospels. Rather than portraying the kingdom as a future reality or a physical location, Thomas portrays it as a present spiritual circumstance. Jesus states, "The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you." This saying proposes that the kingdom exists wherever individuals acknowledge their genuine spiritual character. The focus on concealment extends to Jesus' instructional technique itself. He frequently refuses to provide direct responses to his disciples' inquiries, rather presenting mysterious replies that demand further contemplation. When questioned about the conclusion of the world, Jesus responds, "Have you discovered then the beginning, that you look for the end? For where the beginning is, there will the end be." This reply redirects concentration from future occurrences to present spiritual comprehension. The Gospel of Thomas addresses material being with doubt, though its perspective demonstrates more intricacy than straightforward rejection. Jesus cautions against becoming connected to the body and the world, but he likewise proposes that spiritual reality can be discovered through proper comprehension of material actuality. He proclaims, "Blessed is the lion which becomes man when consumed by man, and cursed is the man whom the lion consumes, and the lion becomes man." This enigmatic saying appears to address the bond between spiritual and physical being. The writing's characterization of Jesus highlights his position as a revealer of hidden reality rather than as a sacrifice for transgression. Jesus communicates of himself as someone who arrived to disclose mysteries that had been concealed since the world's formation. He asserts to deliver fire to the earth and to generate separations among individuals, proposing that his communication would contest conventional religious comprehension. The Gospel of Thomas incorporates multiple sayings that appear to advance social inversion. Jesus proclaims, "Many who are first will become last, and they will become one and the same." He likewise proposes that spiritual comprehension might be more attainable to social outcasts than to religious powers. These declarations suggest at a variety of spirituality that contested existing power configurations. The writing's method to gender relations demonstrates especially mysterious. The concluding saying quotes Jesus as stating, "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit, resembling you males. For every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." This bewildering declaration has produced countless understandings, spanning from literal gender metamorphosis to symbolic portrayals of spiritual cultivation. The focus on concealment and hidden awareness in Thomas mirrors wider themes in early Christian mysticism. Numerous early Christian populations maintained that Jesus had disclosed different degrees of reality to different individuals. The most meaningful spiritual perceptions were designated for advanced disciples who had demonstrated their preparation to obtain deeper teachings. The Gospel of Thomas proposes that spiritual metamorphosis demands moving outside conventional religious classifications. Jesus communicates of transcending separations between male and female, circumcised and uncircumcised, free and enslaved. This transcendence appears to encompass acknowledging a spiritual reality that exists prior to and outside social and physical variations. The writing's mysterious character fulfills a pedagogical objective, compelling individuals to interact actively with Jesus' teachings rather than receiving them passively. The sayings oppose straightforward understanding, demanding sustained contemplation and spiritual cultivation. This method assumes that spiritual reality cannot be straightforwardly transmitted through transparent clarifications, but must be uncovered through individual encounter and perception. The hidden significances in Thomas frequently indicate toward mystical encounters that transcend ordinary awareness. Jesus communicates of becoming intoxicated on the bubbling spring that he has distributed, proposing conditions of spiritual intoxication that disclose hidden realities about actuality. These allusions to altered awareness link the writing to wider customs of mystical spirituality. The Gospel of Thomas portrays Jesus as an instructor who presents connection to divine wisdom through attentive concentration to hidden significances. The writing assumes that spiritual reality exists concealed underneath the exterior of ordinary encounter, awaiting to be uncovered by those who possess the perception and determination to look deeper. This method to spirituality persists in attracting individuals who pursue direct individual encounter of the divine rather than mediated religious power. Jesus, the enigmatic instructor. The Jesus who surfaces from the Gospel of Thomas resembles little the compassionate healer and moral instructor familiar from the canonical Gospels. Thomas portrays a character who communicates in puzzles, contests, conventional wisdom, and presents mysterious perceptions that demand attentive understanding. This Jesus operates more like a spiritual sage than a conventional religious authority. The instructional approach utilized by Jesus in Thomas highlights inquiries rather than responses. When disciples pose direct inquiries, Jesus frequently replies with paradoxes or counter-inquiries that redirect concentration to deeper spiritual subjects. This method assumes that genuine comprehension cannot be straightforwardly transmitted through clarifications, but must be uncovered through individual perception and spiritual cultivation. Jesus in Thomas frequently communicates like a philosopher investigating the character of actuality. He articulates declarations about the consolidation of opposites, the bond between interior and exterior encounter, and the transcendence of conventional classifications. These philosophical observations propose an instructor who grasped spiritual reality in terms of universal principles rather than particular religious teachings. The writing characterizes Jesus as someone who possessed secret awareness about the character of being. He asserts to disclose mysteries that were concealed from the world's establishment, proposing that his instruction supplied connection to primordial wisdom that had been forfeited or hidden. This position, as a revealer of hidden reality, distinguishes the Thomas Jesus from the canonical Jesus, who primarily presented moral direction and salvation. The Jesus of Thomas exhibits remarkable confidence in his spiritual power. He proclaims himself to be the light over all things and asserts that all things emerged forth from me and all things reached me. These declarations claim a cosmic importance that extends outside the position of a human instructor, proposing someone who grasped himself as intimately linked to the divine source of being. The instructional technique utilized by Jesus in Thomas frequently encompasses inversion of normal anticipations. He proclaims that the last will be first, that those who experience hunger will be satisfied, and that spiritual prosperity arrives through welcoming poverty. These inversions compel hearers to interrogate their assumptions about value, achievement, and spiritual advancement. Jesus in Thomas communicates regularly about the significance of becoming like children. He proposes that spiritual maturity encompasses recovering the straightforwardness and directness that typifies childhood awareness. This focus on childlike perception exists in tension with the sophisticated philosophical substance of numerous sayings, fashioning a paradox that itself demands understanding. The writing portrays Jesus as someone who grasped the illusory character of conventional actuality. He communicates of the world as a corpse and cautions against becoming connected to material being. Simultaneously, he proposes that proper comprehension of the world can guide to spiritual freedom. This nuanced perspective of materiality mirrors an instruction that neither entirely rejects nor completely welcomes physical being. Jesus in Thomas frequently utilizes metaphors extracted from daily existence to demonstrate spiritual realities. He communicates of merchants, farmers, builders, and other ordinary occupations, but he employs these familiar illustrations to indicate toward hidden spiritual actualities. This instructional approach renders meaningful realities attainable while simultaneously hiding them from those who absent spiritual perception. The interpersonal dynamics between Jesus and his disciples in Thomas disclose an instructional bond based on spiritual cultivation rather than institutional power. Jesus replies to different disciples per their degree of comprehension, presenting more advanced teachings to those who exhibit greater spiritual maturity. This individualized method assumes that spiritual reality must be transmitted differently to different individuals. The Jesus of Thomas exhibits minimal interest in creating religious institutions or external varieties of worship. He proposes that genuine spiritual discipline encompasses interior metamorphosis rather than ceremonial compliance. When questioned about fasting, prayer, and providing alms, Jesus replies with teachings that redirect concentration to spiritual perspectives rather than external conducts. The writing characterizes Jesus as someone who grasped the temporary character of his physical existence. He communicates of disclosing himself to his disciples while he exists with them, but he likewise proposes that his genuine existence transcends physical structure. This comprehension of spiritual existence outside physical being links to wider themes about the character of divine actuality. Jesus in Thomas frequently communicates in manners that contest social conventions and religious powers. He proposes that spiritual comprehension might be more attainable to tax collectors and prostitutes than to religious authorities. This preferential selection for social outcasts mirrors an instruction that valued spiritual authenticity over social respectability. The emotional character of Jesus' instruction in Thomas tends toward urgency and intensity. He communicates of delivering fire to the earth and of generating separations among individuals. These declarations propose someone who grasped that spiritual reality would necessarily fashion conflict with conventional religious and social configurations. The Jesus of Thomas exhibits sophisticated comprehension of human psychology and spiritual cultivation. He acknowledges that individuals oppose spiritual reality because it contests their comfortable assumptions about actuality. His instructional technique accounts for this opposition by presenting reality in structures that can penetrate psychological defenses while progressively metamorphosing awareness. The writing portrays Jesus as someone who held direct experiential awareness of spiritual reality. He communicates with the confidence of someone who has individually uncovered the realities he instructs, rather than someone who has merely absorbed them from others. This experiential basis provides his instruction a quality of genuineness that surpasses simple, intellectual comprehension. The Jesus, surfacing from the Gospel of Thomas, presents a vision of spiritual instruction that highlights individual metamorphosis over institutional religion. His enigmatic approach contests readers to cultivate their own spiritual perception rather than receiving teachings without question. This method to spiritual power persists in shaping mystical customs within Christianity and outside its boundaries. The kingdom exists within you. The most transformative teaching in the Gospel of Thomas addresses the location and character of God's kingdom. Where the canonical Gospels frequently portray the kingdom as a future reality destined to arrive through divine intervention, Thomas positions it in the current moment and within human awareness itself. This transformation in outlook converts the entire spiritual journey from awaiting external salvation to uncovering interior divine reality. Jesus in Thomas proclaims, "The kingdom is inside of you and it is outside of you." This declaration dissolves the separation between interior and exterior reality, indicating that the divine realm exists wherever individuals acknowledge their genuine spiritual character. The kingdom transforms from a place requiring entry into a condition requiring recognition and encounter. The writing broadens this theme through multiple sayings, portraying the kingdom's concealed presence in ordinary reality. Jesus informs his disciples, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, and the above like the below, and when you make the male and the female one and the same, so that the male not be male, nor the female female, then will you enter the kingdom." This intricate saying proposes that entering the kingdom encompasses transcending conventional dualities, structuring ordinary awareness. The division between interior and exterior, above and below, male and female, signifies the fragmented consciousness, preventing individuals from acknowledging their fundamental unity with divine reality. Spiritual metamorphosis encompasses healing these separations and recovering primordial wholeness. The Gospel of Thomas portrays the kingdom as something already existing in its completeness, but remaining concealed from ordinary awareness. Jesus proclaims, "The kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it." This saying indicates that divine reality saturates the ordinary world, but individuals fail to acknowledge it because their consciousness functions according to restricted patterns of perception. The writing presents multiple metaphors for the kingdom's hidden existence. Jesus compares it to a treasure concealed in a field, valuable beyond calculation, but invisible to those unaware of where to search. He likewise compares it to a pearl of tremendous worth, something that wise traders will sacrifice everything to obtain. These metaphors stress both the kingdom's immense value and its hidden character. The focus on present availability distinguishes Thomas from apocalyptic customs that stress the kingdom's future arrival. While the canonical Gospels frequently describe the kingdom as something Jesus will create through his death and resurrection, Thomas indicates that it exists presently for those possessing the spiritual perception to acknowledge it. This outlook transforms the spiritual journey from awaiting divine intervention to cultivating interior consciousness. The Gospel of Thomas links the kingdom's recognition to a process of spiritual awakening, encompassing seeing outside conventional reality. Jesus tells his disciples, "Blessed are the eyes which see what you see." This blessing indicates that ordinary perception must be metamorphosed before the kingdom becomes visible. The writing implies that most individuals live in a state of spiritual blindness, preventing them from acknowledging the divine presence surrounding them. The concept of the kingdom within likewise relates to the text's focus on self-knowledge. Jesus proclaims, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you." This saying indicates that salvation encompasses discovering and manifesting an interior spiritual reality rather than receiving external assistance. The kingdom within transforms into something requiring uncovering rather than something requiring giving. The writing portrays the kingdom as both a present reality and a process of ongoing exploration. Jesus communicates of entering the kingdom, but he likewise describes it as something that distributes and expands. This dynamic quality indicates that kingdom awareness encompasses both initial recognition and continued cultivation. Individuals don't simply arrive at the kingdom, they participate in its ongoing manifestation. The Gospel of Thomas contests traditional religious classifications by indicating that the kingdom transcends institutional boundaries. Jesus proclaims, "I am the light over all things, I am all. From me everything came forth, and unto me everything extends." This cosmic vision indicates that divine reality encompasses all existence, rather than being restricted to specific religious populations or disciplines. The text's characterization of the kingdom highlights direct individual encounter over mediated religious power. Jesus tells his disciples, "When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father." This saying indicates that acknowledging the kingdom within encompasses discovering one's fundamental identity as a child of God. The Gospel of Thomas portrays the kingdom as something capable of being encountered in ordinary awareness through proper comprehension. Jesus proclaims, "What you look forward to has already come, but you do not recognize it." This declaration indicates that the kingdom's arrival doesn't demand dramatic external transformations, but rather a metamorphosis in consciousness, permitting individuals to perceive what was perpetually present. The writing links the kingdom to a state of spiritual unity, transcending ordinary psychological separations. Jesus communicates of making the two one and reconciling opposites as conditions for entering the kingdom. This psychological integration encompasses healing the fragmented awareness, preventing individuals from acknowledging their fundamental wholeness. The focus on the kingdom within likewise relates to the text's comprehension of spiritual power. Rather than positioning divine authority in external institutions or religious authorities, Thomas indicates that each individual possesses direct connection to the kingdom through their own interior spiritual character. This democratization of spiritual power contested traditional religious hierarchies. The Gospel of Thomas portrays the kingdom as something capable of being distributed and conveyed through spiritual instruction. Jesus proclaims, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become like me. I myself shall become he, and the things that are hidden will be revealed to him." This saying indicates that spiritual metamorphosis encompasses a kind of identity convergence between instructor and student, revealing hidden realities. The text's vision of the kingdom within persists in shaping mystical customs within Christianity and outside its boundaries. The concept that divine reality exists within human awareness, rather than in external locations, has attracted spiritual pursuers, valuing direct individual encounter over institutional mediation. This internalization of the kingdom signifies one of the most distinctive and influential dimensions of the Gospel of Thomas. The concept of the kingdom within likewise links to wider philosophical inquiries about the character of awareness and reality. If divine reality exists within human consciousness, then the boundaries between self and cosmos, individual and universal, become permeable. This outlook indicates that spiritual metamorphosis encompasses acknowledging the divine character of awareness itself. The Gospel of Thomas portrays the kingdom as both the objective of spiritual pursuit and the foundation from which pursuit emerges. Jesus proclaims, "The kingdom exists within you and outside you." This paradoxical declaration indicates that the very capacity to pursue the kingdom establishes its presence within the pursuer. The writing implies that spiritual longing itself discloses the divine character of human awareness, Gnostic or otherwise. The bond between the Gospel of Thomas and Gnosticism signifies one of the most contested questions in early Christian research. The writing contains elements appearing to harmonize with Gnostic themes, but it likewise incorporates teachings appearing to oppose basic Gnostic assumptions about reality and salvation. This ambiguity has guided academics to different conclusions about Thomas's theological orientation. Gnosticism, as comprehended by ancient church authorities like Irenaeus, encompassed multiple key convictions, distinguishing it from Orthodox Christianity. Gnostic frameworks typically instructed that the material realm was fashioned by a lesser deity termed the demiurge, who remained ignorant of or opposed to the authentic God. They maintained that human souls represented sparks of divine radiance imprisoned in material bodies, and that salvation encompassed obtaining secret awareness, permitting souls to flee physical existence and return to the divine realm. The Gospel of Thomas possesses certain characteristics with Gnostic writings. The focus on secret awareness surfaces in the opening passages, promising immortality to those discovering the understanding of Jesus' hidden sayings. The writing likewise manifests doubt of material existence, cautioning against attachment to the body and the world. These themes harmonize with Gnostic concerns about the spiritual hazards of material existence. The saying, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you," harmonizes with Gnostic concepts about the divine spark within human souls. This declaration indicates that salvation encompasses discovering and manifesting an interior spiritual reality rather than receiving external assistance. The focus on self-knowledge as the route to salvation mirrors Gnostic themes about the significance of acknowledging one's genuine divine character. However, the Gospel of Thomas, likewise, contains elements appearing inconsistent with typical Gnostic theology. The writing never explicitly rejects the material realm as malevolent or describes it as the formation of a lesser deity. Rather, Jesus communicates of the kingdom as being distributed upon the earth, indicating that divine reality saturates the physical realm rather than existing separate from it. The text's perspective toward the Creator God likewise varies from standard Gnostic instruction. While Gnostics typically distinguished between the false Creator God and the authentic Divine Father, Thomas refers consistently to God as Father without indicating any separation between Creator and Redeemer. This unified comprehension of divine reality exists in tension with the intricate divine hierarchies characterizing most Gnostic frameworks. The Gospel of Thomas portrays Jesus as a revealer of hidden reality, which harmonizes with Gnostic characterizations of Jesus as a divine messenger arriving to awaken souls to their genuine character. However, the writing likewise incorporates sayings indicating Jesus' distinctive cosmic importance, proclaiming that all things emerged forth from him and returned to him. This elevated Christology extends outside typical Gnostic descriptions of Jesus as one revealer among numerous. The text's treatment of the body and material existence demonstrates more nuanced than straightforward rejection. While Jesus cautions against becoming attached to the body, he likewise indicates that spiritual reality can be uncovered through proper comprehension of material reality. The saying about the lion and the individual appears to address the bond between spiritual and physical existence in manners transcending simple dualism. The Gospel of Thomas incorporates multiple sayings appearing to advance ascetic disciplines which were common in Gnostic populations. Jesus communicates favorably of those fasting from the world and indicates that spiritual cultivation demands renouncing material attachments. These themes link the writing to wider ascetic customs within early Christianity. The question of Thomas's bond to Gnosticism grows complicated by the variety of movements academics classify as Gnostic. Certain Gnostic frameworks highlighted radical rejection of material existence, whereas others instructed that spiritual reality could be discovered through proper comprehension of the created realm. The Gospel of Thomas might harmonize with certain varieties of Gnosticism while rejecting others. The text's focus on the kingdom within harmonizes with Gnostic concepts about the divine spark within human souls, but it likewise links to Jewish and early Christian customs about God's presence in human hearts. The saying, "The kingdom is within you and outside you," indicates a vision of divine reality encompassing both interior and exterior dimensions rather than rejecting the external realm completely. The Gospel of Thomas portrays a variety of Christianity, highlighting direct spiritual encounter over institutional power, which harmonizes with Gnostic preferences for individual revelation over church custom. However, the writing likewise incorporates sayings indicating the significance of community and mutual spiritual encouragement, themes less prominent in individualistic Gnostic movements. The academic discussion about Thomas's Gnostic persona mirrors wider questions about defining Gnosticism itself. Certain academics advocate for a narrow definition, concentrating on particular mythological frameworks, whereas others prefer a wider comprehension, incorporating various varieties of esoteric Christianity. The Gospel of Thomas fits more readily into wider definitions of Gnosticism than into narrow ones. The text's characterization of Jesus as a wisdom instructor, presenting connection to hidden spiritual realities, links it to wider customs of religious esotericism, extending outside specifically Gnostic movements. Ancient, Jewish, Greek, and Christian populations all cultivated varieties of mystical instruction, highlighting secret awareness and direct spiritual encounter. The Gospel of Thomas might signify a variety of early Christian mysticism, sharing certain themes with Gnosticism without completely embracing Gnostic cosmology or theology. The text's focus on interior spiritual metamorphosis and its doubt of external religious power harmonized it with Gnostic concerns while preserving connections to other varieties of early Christian spirituality. The question of whether Thomas is Gnostic ultimately relies on how one defines Gnosticism and how widely one understands the text's theological implications. The Gospel of Thomas contains elements indicating Gnostic influence, while likewise incorporating teachings indicating in other trajectories. This theological intricacy mirrors the diverse and experimental character of early Christian spirituality. Sayings creating division. Certain sayings in the Gospel of Thomas contest fundamental assumptions underlying the canonical Gospels and traditional Christian theology. These disputed declarations disclose alternative comprehensions of Jesus' communication, competing directly with orthodox understandings. The tensions between Thomas and canonical Christianity become most evident in these divisive sayings. The concluding saying in Thomas portrays one of the most disputed declarations in early Christian literature. Jesus proclaims, "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit, resembling you males. For every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." This bewildering declaration about gender metamorphosis has produced intense academic discussion and feminist criticism. Various understandings have been proposed for this enigmatic saying. Certain academics indicate that making female male refers to transcending gender separations completely, achieving a spiritual condition existing outside conventional classifications of male and female. Others propose that the saying mirrors ancient convictions about the spiritual superiority of masculinity, indicating that women must symbolically become male to achieve salvation. The saying generates tension with canonical Gospels, portraying Jesus as welcoming to women and inclusive in his spiritual communication. While the canonical Jesus contests social conventions about gender positions, he doesn't indicate that women must become male to enter God's kingdom. This variation in outlook mirrors wider disagreements about gender and spiritual power in early Christian populations. Another disputed saying addresses the question of spiritual power and religious hierarchy. Jesus proclaims, "The Pharisees and the scribes have taken the keys of knowledge and hidden them. They themselves have not entered, nor have they allowed to enter those who wish to." This declaration criticizes religious powers for blocking connection to spiritual reality rather than facilitating it. The canonical Gospels likewise record Jesus' criticisms of religious authorities, but Thomas portrays a more systematic rejection of institutional religious power. The writing indicates that official religious authorities not solely fail to comprehend spiritual reality, but actively prevent others from uncovering it. This outlook attracted populations feeling marginalized by emerging church hierarchies. The Gospel of Thomas incorporates sayings appearing to minimize the significance of traditional religious disciplines. When questioned about fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, Jesus replies, "If you fast, you will give rise to sin for yourselves. And if you pray, you will be condemned, and if you give alms, you will do harm to your spirits." This declaration seems to reject disciplines central to Jewish and early Christian devotion. The canonical Gospels portray Jesus as someone participating in traditional religious disciplines while likewise contesting their abuse. Jesus fasts, prays, and instructs about generous giving, though he criticizes hypocritical religious compliance. Thomas indicates a more radical rejection of external religious disciplines in favor of interior spiritual metamorphosis. The text's treatment of Jesus' death and resurrection varies substantially from canonical focus on these occurrences. While the canonical Gospels organize their entire narratives around Jesus' sacrificial death and victorious resurrection, Thomas references neither occurrence. This absence indicates a variety of Christianity discovering Jesus' importance in his instruction rather than in his death. The Gospel of Thomas portrays Jesus as a revealer of hidden wisdom rather than as a sacrifice for transgression. This outlook contests the substitutionary atonement theology becoming central to Orthodox Christianity. The writing indicates that salvation arrives through comprehending Jesus' instruction rather than through confidence in his death and resurrection. Multiple sayings in Thomas seem to advance a variety of realized eschatology, opposing future-oriented anticipations discovered in the canonical Gospels. Jesus proclaims, "What you look forward to has already come, but you do not recognize it." This declaration indicates that the salvation and kingdom other Gospels position in the future represent actually present realities, demanding recognition rather than awaiting. The canonical Gospels preserve tension between the kingdom's present reality and its future consummation. They indicate that Jesus' ministry inaugurated the kingdom, but that its complete manifestation awaits his return. Thomas resolves this tension by positioning the kingdom completely in present encounter, contesting Christian hope for future resurrection and cosmic metamorphosis. The writing incorporates sayings, appearing to de-emphasize the significance of Jesus' distinctive identity in favor of his instruction. While Thomas does incorporate declarations about Jesus' cosmic importance, it likewise indicates that disciples can achieve the identical spiritual condition as their instructor. Jesus proclaims, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become like me. I myself shall become he." The canonical Gospels preserve a transparent separation between Jesus' divine character and his disciples' human character. While believers can be metamorphosed through bond with Jesus, they don't become identical to him. Thomas indicates a more fluid comprehension of spiritual identity, permitting greater convergence between instructor and student. The Gospel of Thomas portrays a vision of Christianity, highlighting interior spiritual awareness over external religious power. This outlook contests the institutional developments occurring in early Christian populations, especially the emergence of episcopal power and creedal orthodoxy. The writing indicates that spiritual reality is attainable to individuals through direct encounter rather than through church mediation. The sayings creating division in Thomas mirror wider tensions within early Christianity about the character of spiritual power, the position of religious institutions, and the significance of salvation. These alternative outlooks were ultimately marginalized through Orthodox Christianity's development, but they persist in shaping Christian consideration and discipline. The disputed sayings in Thomas disclose the variety and intricacy of early Christian spirituality. They establish that populations understood Jesus' communication in manners varying significantly from what would become Orthodox Christianity. These variations mirror genuine theological disagreements rather than simple miscomprehensions. The Gospel of Thomas safeguards voices from early Christian populations, highlighting mystical encounter, individual spiritual cultivation, and opposition to institutional power. The sayings dividing contemporary readers likewise divided ancient populations, contributing to the theological conflicts shaping Orthodox Christianity's development. Power in question. Imagine the early Christian realm as a dwelling with numerous chambers, each occupied with different voices, asserting to communicate for Jesus. Within one chamber, bishops assemble around marble surfaces, their garments weighted with power. Within another, wandering instructors sit cross-legged on dusty floors, communicating in puzzles. The Gospel of Thomas moves between these chambers, quietly contesting everyone inside. Traditional Christianity constructed itself on foundations of apostolic succession. Peter obtained the keys to heaven. The 12 disciples established the foundation. Bishops traced their power back through an uninterrupted chain to Jesus himself. This fashioned a pyramid of authority with God at the summit, flowing downward through Christ, then the apostles, then bishops, then priests, then the faithful below. Thomas disrupts this complete configuration. The Gospel portrays Jesus directly to pursuers, circumventing all intermediaries. No bishops necessary, no priests demanded, no church hierarchy essential. The divine spark resides within each individual, awaiting to be uncovered. This instruction cuts directly through the attentive architecture of institutional authority. Consider saying 13, where Jesus tells Thomas that he has consumed from the bubbling spring and become intoxicated with the divine. Thomas cannot even communicate about what he has absorbed because it transcends ordinary language. Here, Jesus circumvents the other disciples completely, communicating soul to soul with Thomas. The communication resonates clearly. Direct encounter surpasses borrowed power. The canonical Gospels attentively safeguard the particular condition of the 12. Even when they stumble or doubt, they remain selected vessels. Thomas the Gospel addresses the disciples differently. They frequently seem confused, overlooking the deeper significances. In saying 43, the disciples question Jesus who he is, and he replies with gentle exasperation, wondering why they still pursue external responses when reality resides within them. This fashions a fundamental tension. If anyone can connect divine wisdom directly, what necessity exists for religious gatekeepers? If the kingdom distributes invisibly across the earth, why construct cathedrals? If God communicates through interior knowing, why demand scriptures? Thomas presents these questions not through argument, but through lived demonstration. The gospel configuration reinforces this anti-hierarchical communication. Unlike the canonical Gospels following Jesus from birth to death, Thomas portrays 114 sayings without transparent arrangement or narrative advancement. Readers must discover their own route through the teachings. No guide clarifies the significances. No power understands the mysteries. Each individual encounters the writing alone, precisely as each soul must uncover its own divine character. Early church authorities acknowledged the threat. If Thomas obtained acceptance, their attentively fashioned power would dissolve. The pyramid would collapse into a circle where every voice possessed equal weight. Rather than shepherds guiding flocks, spiritual equals would distribute discoveries. The very concept of orthodoxy would transform meaningless. Thomas likewise contests the emerging concept of apostolic witness. The canonical Gospels stress that the disciples witnessed Jesus execute miracles, heard his teachings, and witnessed his resurrection. This direct encounter provided them distinctive power to communicate about Jesus. Thomas undermines this by indicating that interior revelation surpasses external witnessing. The Gospel's renowned saying 52 demonstrates this perfectly. When the disciples reference the 24 prophets who communicated before Jesus, he replies that they have abandoned the living one in favor of the deceased. Genuine spiritual power arrives not from inheriting ancient wisdom, but from uncovering present reality. The past cannot contain the infinite. This instruction threatened the complete biblical custom. If present interior knowing outweighs scriptural power, then centuries of accumulated wisdom become secondary. Prophets, patriarchs, and apostles all withdraw for the immediate encounter of divine presence. The canon itself transforms optional rather than fundamental. Thomas portrays Jesus as an instructor who destroys the very concept of discipleship. Rather than fashioning followers, he awakens equals. Rather than creating a church, he dissolves the barriers between sacred and ordinary. Rather than establishing a religion, he indicates outside all religions to the source they dimly mirror. The political implications proved staggering. Early Christianity was already struggling to establish itself against Roman power, Jewish custom, and pagan philosophy. Interior unity appeared fundamental for survival. Thomas pulled in the opposite trajectory, encouraging individual spiritual investigation over collective identity. This rendered it hazardous, not solely theologically, but practically. Church authorities confronted a selection. Welcome, Thomas, and risk chaos, or reject it and preserve arrangement. They selected arrangement, but the expense proved enormous. By silencing Thomas, they likewise silenced a vision of Christianity, trusting ordinary individuals to discover God without intermediaries. The religion emerging proved safer but smaller, more controlled but less mysterious. The irony courses deep. In rejecting Thomas to safeguard apostolic power, the church authorities exercised the very institutional authority that Thomas questioned. They transformed the gatekeepers they asserted to serve, determining which voices could communicate for Jesus and which must remain silent. The pyramid of power defended itself by concealing the circular alternative. Banned, concealed, forgotten. Picture the correspondence arriving on expensive papyrus, sealed with the bishop's ring. Irenaeus of Lyons sits in his study, encircled by scrolls and codices, fashioning words destined to resonate through centuries. The year approaches 180 CE, and he confronts a crisis. Too numerous gospels, too numerous voices. Too numerous interpretations of Jesus. The Church demands clarity, and clarity demands selections. Irenaeus lifts his reed pen and commences composing against heresies, a massive composition destined to establish Orthodox Christianity for generations. Among his targets, the Gospel of Thomas. He dismisses it as an assemblage of hazardous mysteries, a writing guiding believers away from the genuine faith. With these words, he commences the extended process of concealment. The early church confronted an impossible challenge. Dozens of Gospels circulated through Christian populations. Certain recounted familiar narratives about Jesus' birth, ministry, and death. Others, like Thomas, presented radically different methods. Market forces couldn't determine which survived. Only power could execute that selection. The process unfolded progressively. First arrived influential voices like Irenaeus, who proposed that solely 4 Gospels merited acceptance, like the 4 corners of the earth or the 4 winds of heaven. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John supplied perfect completeness. Any additional Gospel disrupted this divine symmetry. Church assemblies followed, convening in grand halls to discuss which books belonged in the biblical canon. The Muratorian fragment, originating around 200 CE, lists accepted writings. Thomas doesn't surface. The communication grows transparent. This gospel possesses no position in Orthodox Christianity. However, books don't vanish simply because bishops disapprove. Thomas persisted, circulating in certain populations, reproduced by hand and distributed in secrecy. Gnostic organizations especially treasured it, perceiving in its mysterious sayings confirmation of their own spiritual perceptions. The writing continued in the shadows. The tide transformed decisively in the 4th century. Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, metamorphosing it from persecuted sect to imperial religion. This delivered unprecedented authority, but likewise unprecedented pressure for uniformity. The empire demanded one Christianity, not numerous competing interpretations. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE concentrated on theological teaching rather than biblical canon, but it created the principle that church powers could determine correct conviction. Subsequent assemblies applied this principle to Scripture itself. The 27 books of the New Testament progressively surfaced as the definitive assemblage. Thomas became victim to this process, not because it lacked spiritual value, but because it threatened institutional control. The Gospel's focus on individual revelation clashed with the Church's necessity for unified power. Its mysterious sayings opposed the kind of systematic understanding Orthodox theology demanded. The suppression assumed multiple varieties. Bishops instructed their congregations to avoid suspicious writings. Scribes ceased reproducing unapproved Gospels. Collections refused to safeguard them. The economics of manuscript generation operated against Thomas. Why expend precious resources on forbidden books when approved writings satisfied every necessity? More aggressive measures followed. Church powers ordered the destruction of heretical compositions. Bonfires consumed centuries of spiritual investigation. Thomas manuscripts vanished into flames or were concealed in sealed jars, hidden by believers unable to witness them destroyed. The Nag Hammadi discovery in 1945 disclosed the extent of this ancient book burning. 13 leather-bound codices, concealed around 350 CE, contained 52 writings that Orthodox Christianity had attempted to eliminate. Among them, a complete Coptic interpretation of the Gospel of Thomas. The timing indicates intentional preservation as persecution intensified. Archaeological confirmation validates this understanding. The monasteries near Nag Hammadi were being converted to Orthodox Christianity in the mid-4th century. Monks confronted a selection: surrender their beloved writings or conceal them. They selected concealment, perhaps hoping future generations would demonstrate more tolerance. The concealment location itself recounts a narrative. The jars were positioned near ancient pagan tombs, in ground already considered sacred, but outside Christian control. The monks couldn't endure destroying Thomas, but they couldn't openly safeguard it either. underground transformed the sole possibility. As centuries advanced, Thomas faded from memory. Medieval Christianity periodically referenced it, usually to condemn its teachings. Academics knew the designation, but lacked the writing. The gospel transformed a ghost, haunting the edges of Christian history without substance. The Protestant Reformation presented a brief opportunity for rediscovery. Reformers contested church power and returned to ancient sources, but they concentrated on the canonical New Testament, not the wider realm of early Christian literature. Thomas remained concealed, both literally and metaphorically. Even when 19th-century academics commenced recovering early Christian writings, they discovered solely fragments of Thomas. A few Greek papyri safeguarded scattered sayings, but these glimpses solely deepened the mystery. The complete gospel remained hidden underneath Egyptian sand. The irony cuts deep. By attempting to eliminate Thomas, church powers may have safeguarded it. The manuscript surviving did so precisely because believers concealed it outside the reach of orthodox suppression. The very act of concealing transformed an act of preservation. This pattern repeated throughout Christian history. Mystics and dissidents treasured Thomas-like perceptions even when they lacked the writing itself. The gospel's spirit continued in medieval mystics, Renaissance humanists, and contemporary spiritual pursuers. The communication demonstrated harder to conceal than the manuscript. The 20th century delivered dramatic transformation. Archaeological discoveries, academic freedom, and spiritual experimentation fashioned new openness to alternative Christian voices. The ground transformed fertile for Thomas to flourish again. However, first, someone needed to excavate it. The absent years. Darkness settles over the ancient writing like sand drifting across forgotten tombs. The Gospel of Thomas enters an extended sleep, concealed underneath centuries of silence. Yet even in darkness, seeds of influence scatter on invisible winds, establishing roots in unexpected locations. The 4th century closes with Thomas officially forgotten. Church collections purge their assemblages. Scriptoriums cease reproducing the writing. The final believers treasuring it grow aged and die without conveying it to the subsequent generation. The gospel transforms a whisper, then silence. However, whispers possess their own authority. Medieval Christianity cultivates a rich, mystical custom resonating Thomas-like themes. Meister Eckhart communicates of the God within, the divine spark residing in every soul. Julian of Norwich composes about the love surrounding us, invisible but everywhere present. These mystics never accessed Thomas, yet their perceptions mirror its deepest teachings. The connection courses deeper than coincidence. Early Christian mysticism extracted from the identical wells nourishing Thomas, direct encounter of the divine, union with the source of all existence, the priority of interior knowing over external power. These streams flowed underground, surfacing in unexpected locations. Islamic mysticism, cultivating in the identical Mediterranean realm, safeguarded similar perceptions. Sufi poets like Rumi communicated of the beloved residing within the lover's heart. The divine presence, Thomas described as hidden yet everywhere, transformed the breadth of Islamic spirituality. Different expressions, identical recognition. Jewish mysticism contributed its own threads. The Kabbalah communicated of hidden radiance concealed within creation, awaiting pursuers to uncover it. The Zohar described a reality where the divine and human interpenetrate completely. These teachings would have harmonized deeply with Thomas' readers had any survived to execute the connection. The Renaissance delivered new possibilities. Humanist academics commenced recovering ancient writings, driven by curiosity about Christianity's origins. They discovered fragments of Thomas in aged collections, tantalizing glimpses of an absent gospel. However, these fragments proved too scattered to reconstruct the whole. Erasmus, the great Dutch humanist, compiled early interpretations of the New Testament, but concentrated on canonical writings. He knew about other Gospels, but lacked connection to complete manuscripts. The instruments for recovery existed, but the materials remained concealed. The Protestant Reformation fashioned additional opportunities. Reformers contested church power and returned to ancient sources. They might have welcomed Thomas as confirmation of diverse early Christianity. Rather, they concentrated on the canonical scriptures, pursuing solid foundation for their own power. The moment advanced. Colonial expansion delivered Western academics into contact with Eastern Christianity. Coptic Christians in Egypt safeguarded ancient customs predating Islam. Certain remembered narratives about hidden gospels, manuscripts concealed in the desert, but these were addressed as legends rather than historical possibilities. The 18th century Enlightenment fostered new interest in Christian origins. Academics commenced applying critical methods to biblical writings, questioning traditional authorship and dating. They fashioned space for recovering absent voices, but archaeological techniques remained primitive. The desert preserved its mysteries. German scholarship in the 19th century pioneered historical critical methods. Investigators traced early Christianity's development, identifying different streams and influences. They acknowledged that the canonical Gospels signified solely one branch of a considerably larger structure. However, they operated with fragments, not complete writings. The discovery of the Oxyrhynchus papyri in Egypt disclosed Greek fragments of Thomas, but academics initially failed to acknowledge them. The sayings appeared too isolated to reconstruct a complete gospel. Solely afterward, following the Nag Hammadi discovery, would these fragments fall into position. Meanwhile, spiritual movements in the West independently cultivated Thomas-like perceptions. Transcendentalists, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, communicated of the divine within each individual. Theosophists investigated hidden wisdom customs. New Thought advocates proclaimed awareness's capacity to metamorphose reality. These organizations would have discovered Thomas deeply congenial. The early 20th century delivered dramatic archaeological discoveries. The Dead Sea Scrolls disclosed Jewish sectarian writings predating Christianity. Gnostic codices surfaced in Egypt, safeguarding alternative Christian customs. The ancient realm was returning to existence, fragment by fragment. Academics commenced reconstructing the intricate realm of early Christianity. They uncovered that the movement proved far more diverse than traditional reports indicated. Multiple competing organizations asserted to follow Jesus. Different gospels circulated in different populations. The canonical scriptures signified one stream among numerous. This academic revolution fashioned perfect conditions for Thomas to return. The scholarly realm was prepared to obtain alternative gospels. The general public was increasingly interested in spiritual customs outside mainstream Christianity. The cultural moment proved ripe for rediscovery, but the writing itself remained hidden. Generations of academics had theorized about absent gospels without being capable of accessing them. The Gospel of Thomas existed in fragments and references, traces of a vanished realm. The complete manuscript rested undisturbed underneath Egyptian sand. The irony proved meaningful. Precisely as the contemporary realm transformed, prepared to welcome Thomas, the ancient realm's attempts to suppress it remained completely successful. The gospel existed in potential, awaiting the proper moment to surface. All the necessary conditions existed in position except one. Someone needed to excavate it. The stage was established for one of archaeology's greatest discoveries. The instruments existed, the academic framework was prepared, the cultural appetite proved enormous. Thomas had survived its concealment, now it demanded its resurrection. Contemporary resurrection. The jar fractures open with a sound like breaking centuries. Muhammad Ali al-Samman brushes away the dust of ages, disclosing papyrus pages that haven't witnessed sunlight since the Roman Empire. The year is 1945, and the Gospel of Thomas is about to return to the realm. The discovery unfolds like a narrative constructed by Providence. A peasant farmer pursuing fertilizer stumbles upon the greatest literary treasure of the 20th century. 13 leather-bound codices concealed near ancient monasteries containing 52 writings that Orthodox Christianity attempted to eliminate. Among them, complete at last, the Gospel of Thomas. The manuscripts commence their journey through the antiquities market, advancing from hand to hand like stolen flames. Dealers in Cairo acknowledge their value without comprehending their importance. European collectors obtain fragments, driven by the excitement of possessing ancient mysteries. The codices scatter across the globe, each fragment bearing part of a revolutionary narrative. Academics gradually assemble together what has been discovered. The Coptic language yields to patient translation. Word by word, saying by saying, the Gospel of Thomas surfaces from its extended silence. The scholarly realm holds its breath as the complete implications transform transparent. This represents not simply another ancient writing. This represents a complete early Christian gospel, safeguarded in its completeness, presenting a radically different vision of Jesus and his teachings. The discovery recomposes the history of Christianity. Everything academics believed they comprehended about the early church suddenly transforms questionable. The writing reaches publication in the 1950s, and the response proves immediate. Biblical academics plunge into detailed analysis, comparing Thomas with the canonical Gospels. They uncover that numerous sayings parallel material in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The bond between these writings transforms a new frontier of investigation. Certain academics propose that Thomas safeguards early customs predating the canonical Gospels. Others preserve that it signifies a subsequent development shaped by Gnostic consideration. The discussion ignites conferences, occupies journals, and launches scholarly careers. Thomas transforms the most examined non-canonical writing in Christian history. However, the Gospel's impact extends far outside scholarly circles. The 1960s counterculture welcomes Thomas as validation of their spiritual pursuing. Here exists a Jesus communicating in puzzles, encouraging direct encounter over institutional power, positioning the divine within rather than above. The hippie movement discovers its gospel. Religious pursuers uncover in Thomas a Christianity they can receive. The writing presents spirituality without dogma, mystery without hierarchy, wisdom without commandments. Individuals who have departed traditional churches discover in Thomas a bridge back to the sacred. The gospel transforms a catalyst for alternative spirituality. The feminist movement asserts Thomas as an ally. 11. The Gospel's treatment of Mary Magdalene as a spiritual equal contests patriarchal understandings of Christianity. The text's focus on interior power undermines male religious hierarchies. Thomas transforms a weapon in the struggle for women's spiritual equality. Popular culture welcomes the Gospel's mystical atmosphere. Films reference its sayings. Musicians transform its words into melody. Artists discover inspiration in its enigmatic imagery. Thomas enters the cultural circulation, shaping creators who may never access the complete text. The New Age movement incorporates Thomas as a central text. Its teachings about hidden divine character harmonize perfectly with metaphysical spirituality. The Gospel's focus on self-knowledge harmonizes with therapeutic culture. Thomas transforms a bridge between ancient wisdom and contemporary psychology. Academic gatherings multiply as researchers grapple with Thomas's implications. The Gospel of Thomas seminar transforms a regular feature at biblical studies meetings. International symposiums attract investigators from across the globe. The text produces more scholarship than numerous canonical books. Publishers acknowledge the market potential. New translations surface regularly, each asserting to capture the Gospel's genuine significance. Study guides assist general readers navigate the challenging sayings. Commentary series multiply, presenting different outlooks on the text's importance. The Internet era amplifies Thomas's reach exponentially. Websites devoted to the Gospel surface by the hundreds. Online discussion organizations debate the significance of individual sayings. Digital collections make the text available to anyone with internet connection. Thomas achieves global accessibility. Contemporary translations proliferate, each mirroring different scholarly and spiritual outlooks. Certain emphasize the text's mystical dimensions. Others highlight its social radicalism. Still, others concentrate on its historical importance. The Gospel multiplies into numerous interpretations, each communicating to different audiences. The writing confronts new challenges in the digital era. Conspiracy theorists assert it contains hidden codes. Sensationalist authors exaggerate its anti-church communication. Popular books generate assertions that serious academics reject. Thomas transforms a battleground between scholarship and speculation. Yet the Gospel's central communication remains unchanged. Direct encounter of the divine surpasses borrowed power. The kingdom of God resides within and around us. Spiritual pursuing demands no intermediaries. These perceptions demonstrate as transformative in the 21st century as they were in the second. The resurrection persists as each new generation uncovers Thomas. University students encounter it in religious studies courses. Spiritual pursuers discover it in meditation organizations. Academics reveal new dimensions of significance. The Gospel, concealed for 16 centuries, experiences a second existence that may demonstrate more influential than its first. The academics at conflict. The conference chamber crackles with intellectual tension. Fluorescent illumination casts harsh shadows across the faces of biblical researchers who have invested decades examining the Gospel of Thomas. Coffee grows cold as passionate arguments unfold. The year is 1985, and the scholarly realm is divided. Elaine Pagels assumes the podium first, her Princeton credentials lending weight to her words. She perceives in Thomas a window into early Christian variety, a time when multiple populations asserted Jesus as their own. The Gospel signifies authentic early custom, she proposes, possibly predating the canonical Gospels. Thomas presents a Christianity valuing individual spiritual encounter over institutional power. Her argument constructs carefully. The sayings in Thomas frequently surface in simpler structure than their canonical parallels. This indicates they might safeguard earlier interpretations of Jesus' teachings. The Gospel's configuration as an assemblage of sayings corresponds what academics theorize about the Q source, the hypothetical manuscript that Matthew and Luke employed alongside Mark. Pagels highlights Thomas's spiritual sophistication. The Gospel doesn't portray Jesus as a dying redeemer, but as a wisdom instructor assisting others to uncover their own divine character. This method harmonizes with educated audiences, struggling with traditional Christianity's focus on transgression and salvation through Christ's death. The chamber stirs as Marvin Meyer rises to reply. His work on Gnostic writings has persuaded him that Thomas belongs to the 2nd century, not the 1st. The Gospel mirrors developed Gnostic consideration, he proposes, not primitive Christian instruction. Its focus on secret awareness and interior divinity harmonizes with subsequent mystical movements. Meyer indicates particular sayings resonating Gnostic themes. The Gospel's treatment of the material realm as inferior to the spiritual realm mirrors Gnostic dualism. Its focus on fleeing the body and returning to the divine source pursues Gnostic mythology. Thomas reads like a Gnostic writing because it represents one. The discussion intensifies as Bart Ehrman assumes the floor. His expertise in early Christian manuscripts delivers a different outlook. He proposes that Thomas signifies a subsequent development shaped by Syrian Christianity and Gnostic consideration. The Gospel's sayings may sound primitive, but this mirrors deliberate archiving rather than authentic antiquity. Ehrman dissects the manuscript confirmation. The earliest Greek fragments of Thomas originate around 200 CE, already displaying signs of textual evolution. The complete Coptic interpretation proves even later, translated from Greek originals that may themselves represent copies of copies. The transmission history indicates a writing evolving across time. He contests the assumption that simpler equals earlier. Ancient authors frequently simplified intricate customs for theological or practical reasons. Thomas's sayings may surface primitive, because the author desired to highlight Jesus' fundamental teachings, not because they safeguard the original structure. April DeConnick enters the discussion with data transforming everything. Her comprehensive analysis of Thomas's language and configuration discloses layers of composition. The Gospel wasn't composed all at once, but expanded through stages, accumulating sayings from different sources and periods. DeConnick's work indicates that Thomas commenced as an assemblage of authentic early sayings, but was subsequently expanded by mystical interpreters. The original kernel may truly predate the canonical Gospels, but the final structure mirrors second-century spiritual concerns. Both sides of the discussion can assert partial victory. Her linguistic analysis discloses different editorial hands. Certain sayings employ simple, concrete language, sounding very much like the historical Jesus. Others utilize abstract, mystical terminology, mirroring subsequent theological evolution. The Gospel represents neither purely early nor purely late, but a complex composite. The academic population fragments into camps. The early Thomas advocates perceive the Gospel as a window into primitive Christianity. The late Thomas supporters regard it as a second-century mystical evolution. The complex Thomas position acknowledges both early and late elements. Each camp marshals confirmation to validate its position. Early advocates indicate parallels with Q material and the Gospel's simple structure. Late supporters highlight Gnostic themes and manuscript dating. Complex position holders trace the text's editorial history. The discussion distributes outside scholarly circles. Popular books champion different positions, frequently with more certainty than the confirmation warrants. Elaine Pagels transforms a media favorite, her proposals reaching millions through documentaries and best-selling books. The Gospel of Thomas transforms a cultural phenomenon. Conservative academics push back, proposing that Thomas signifies a heretical deviation from authentic Christianity. They highlight the Gospel's exclusion from the canon and its conflict with orthodox instruction. The writing transforms a battleground between traditional and progressive Christianity. International scholarship contributes new voices. European academics deliver different methodological methods. Middle Eastern investigators present perceptions from regional customs. The discussion transforms global, with conferences in multiple languages. Feminist academics highlight the Gospel's treatment of gender subjects. Liberation theologians discover validation for their focus on spiritual equality. Mystical interpreters celebrate the text's focus on interior encounter. Each organization discovers in Thomas what they pursue. The internet era multiplies the voices. Online forums buzz with amateur theories. Bloggers advocate for their favorite understandings. Social media amplifies both scholarly perceptions and popular misconceptions. The discussion transforms democratized and chaotic. Recent discoveries persist in fueling the dispute. New manuscript fragments supply additional confirmation. Archaeological discoveries illuminate the realm, producing Thomas. Each new fragment of data demands academics to reconsider their positions. The conflict of understanding mirrors deeper questions about Christian origins. Was early Christianity diverse or unified? Did Jesus instruct esoteric wisdom or public salvation? Can contemporary spirituality learn from ancient alternatives? Thomas transforms a symbol for these larger discussions. The voice of the margins. The meditation hall becomes silent as the instructor opens an ancient writing. Fluorescent illumination dims to candle glow. Urban pursuers settle into lotus position, their smartphones silenced for an hour of spiritual investigation. The Gospel of Thomas has discovered its contemporary congregation. These aren't traditional Christians. They possess wounds from rigid childhoods, disappointments with institutional religion, questions Sunday school couldn't respond to. They've wandered through Buddhism, yoga, New Age workshops, and therapy sessions. Now they uncover Jesus communicating in a voice they've never heard previously. The instructor reads, saying 70, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have will destroy you." Heads nod in recognition. This resonates like the wisdom they've been pursuing, not guilt and commandments, but invitation and possibility. Thomas transforms a bridge for the spiritually homeless. Individuals loving Jesus but rejecting churches discover in this gospel a route back to the sacred. The writing presents Christianity without the institutional baggage. Here exists a Jesus sounding more like a Zen master than a moral judge. The attraction cuts across demographic boundaries. Former Catholics uncover a mystical Christianity honoring their contemplative instincts. Protestant refugees discover wisdom without dogma. Secular pursuers encounter a Jesus they can respect. The gospel fashions space for spiritual investigation without religious dedication. Women especially welcome Thomas's alternative vision. The Gospel's treatment of Mary Magdalene as a spiritual equal contests patriarchal Christianity. Its focus on interior power undermines male religious hierarchies. Here exists a Jesus, not demanding submission, but encouraging exploration. The LGBTQ community discovers in Thomas a refuge from condemnation. The Gospel's concentration on spiritual unity transcends social classifications. Its vision of divine presence within everyone presents dignity to individuals rejected by traditional churches. Thomas transforms a safe harbor for religious exiles. Interfaith pursuers appreciate the Gospel's mystical universalism. Its teachings about interior divine character harmonize with Hindu concepts of Atman. Its focus on direct encounter echoes Buddhist mindfulness. Its vision of hidden kingdom harmonizes with Sufi spirituality. Thomas transforms a meeting ground for wisdom, customs. Academic exhaustees uncover in Thomas a spirituality honoring intellectual honesty. The Gospel's enigmatic sayings oppose simple understanding, demanding thoughtful engagement. Its refusal to present easy responses attracts individuals grown tired of religious certainty. Here exists faith-welcoming mystery. The writing attracts individuals in transition. Midlife pursuers questioning their existence, choices discover in Thomas permission to investigate interior landscapes. Young adults rejecting their parents' religion uncover an alternative Christian route. Elderly individuals, preparing for death, encounter teachings about eternal existence, not demanding conviction in particular doctrines. Thomas communicates to therapeutic culture. Its focus on self-knowledge harmonizes with psychological healing. Its teachings about delivering forth what exists within sound like recovery wisdom. The Gospel transforms a spiritual companion for individuals working through trauma and metamorphosis. The environmental movement discovers in Thomas a different bond with the natural realm. The Gospel's vision of divine presence everywhere, incorporating in split wood and lifted stones, presents an alternative to Christianity's reputation for environmental neglect. Here exists a Jesus perceiving the sacred in material creation. Artists and composers gravitate toward Thomas's poetic language. The Gospel's enigmatic sayings spark creative understanding. Its mysterious imagery inspires paintings, poems, and songs. The writing transforms a muse for individuals pursuing to manifest the ineffable. The marginalized discover in Thomas a voice for their encounter. The Gospel's inversions of social norms communicate to individuals outside mainstream culture. Its focus on hidden wisdom validates awareness arriving from suffering. Here exists a Jesus comprehending existence on the edges. Recovery populations uncover in Thomas a spirituality not demanding traditional religious dedication. The Gospel's focus on metamorphosis, without judgment, attracts individuals healing from addiction. Its teachings about discovering the divine within present hope without shame. The writing transforms a resource for spiritual direction. Contemplative guides employ Thomas's sayings as meditation focuses. Retreat centers present workshops on the Gospel's mystical teachings. The ancient writing discovers new existence in contemporary spiritual discipline. Online populations multiply around Thomas' understanding. Forums buzz with discussions of challenging sayings. Social media organizations distribute individual perceptions. The Gospel transforms a focal point for digital spirituality. The attraction extends outside individuals to whole populations. Alternative Christian churches incorporate Thomas into their worship. Interfaith organizations employ the gospel as common ground. The writing fashions new varieties of religious population. Mental health professionals uncover in Thomas a resource for spiritual wellness. The Gospel's focus on interior knowing validates individual encounter, its teachings about discovering peace within present therapeutic value. Here exists ancient wisdom, validating contemporary healing. The writing confronts criticism from traditional Christians, perceiving it as hazardous deception. They propose that Thomas guides individuals away from authentic faith. The gospel transforms a battleground between institutional and alternative Christianity. Yet the stream of pursuers persists, flowing toward Thomas. In a realm of religious polarization, the gospel presents a different possibility. Not conversion, but exploration. Not submission, but investigation. Not responses, but better questions. The voice of the margins communicates through Thomas to a realm hungry for authentic spirituality. The gospel, concealed for 16 centuries, has discovered its genuine audience, individuals pursuing God outside the walls of conventional religion. The Sayings in Detail, Part 1. The morning radiance filters through monastery windows as we open the Gospel of Thomas to examine its most treasured teachings. Each saying possesses the weight of centuries, polished smooth by countless pursuers, discovering in these words a doorway to the divine. Saying 3 surfaces like sunrise over ancient hills. If your leaders say to you, "Look, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds will precede you. If they say to you, "It is in the sea," then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is within you and outside you. Imagine Jesus sitting by the Sea of Galilee, observing fishermen cast their nets while birds wheel overhead. A disciple inquires where heaven can be discovered, and Jesus gestures toward the water, the sky, then positions his hand over his heart. This saying shatters conventional religious geography. The kingdom isn't a distant location demanding maps or guides. It resides in the breathing space between heartbeats, in the consciousness noticing its own noticing. Jesus indicates outside the horizontal pursuit toward the vertical dimension of presence itself. The instruction persists. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will realize that you are the children of the living Father. Self-knowledge transforms the key, unlocking divine bond. Not the surface self with its positions and narratives, but the deeper self, existing before designations and after death. Saying 22 unfolds like a parable within a parable. When you make the two into one, and when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, and when you make male and female into a single one, so that the male will not be male, nor the female be female, then you will enter the kingdom. Imagine Jesus communicating to an organization where social separations course deep. Men and women sit separately, rich and poor wear different garments, religious and secular possess different assumptions. The instruction calls for radical integration, not the elimination of variations, but their transcendence. The kingdom surfaces when opposites uncover their hidden unity. Interior and exterior reality merge into seamless wholeness. The divine, masculine and feminine dance together in perfect balance. This saying contests every variety of spiritual dualism. Heaven and earth aren't separate realms, but different faces of one reality. Sacred and secular collapse into integrated existence. The pursuer and the pursued disclose themselves as dimensions of the identical mystery. Saying 42 stands alone in its brevity. Be passers-by. Imagine Jesus observing pilgrims on the route to Jerusalem, their backs bent under heavy packs, their faces established toward distant destinations. With 2 words, he overturns the complete journey. The instruction indicates that attachment to any position, conviction, or identity restricts spiritual freedom. Even attachment to pursuing must be released. The kingdom belongs to those traveling light, holding all encounters lightly, remaining open to constant metamorphosis. This saying communicates directly to contemporary spiritual consumers, collecting teachings like souvenirs. Thomas indicates toward a different method: touch but don't grasp, learn but don't hoard, encounter but don't cling. The root demands becoming pathless. Saying 50 discloses the cosmic dimension of identity. If they say to you, "Where have you come from?" say to them, "We have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself, established itself, and appeared in their image." If they say to you, "Is it you?" say, "We are its children, and we are the chosen of the living Father." Imagine Jesus communicating to individuals feeling lost in the realm, uncertain of their origins or destiny. The instruction supplies a spiritual genealogy, transcending biological inheritance. Each individual possesses within them the original radiance preceding creation, not fallen beings demanding salvation, but children of luminosity temporarily playing in the realm of structures. This saying presents meaningful healing for anyone feeling abandoned or unloved. The identity it proclaims cannot be earned or forfeited. It exists prior to birth and survives death. The radiance shining within each individual represents the identical radiance illuminating galaxies. Saying 70 contains perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated instruction in ancient literature. If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have will destroy you. Imagine Jesus communicating to individuals imprisoned in social positions, not corresponding their interior character. The tax collector longing to be a poet, the merchant dreaming of instructing children, the housewife possessing visions of divine love. The instruction indicates that each individual possesses within them their own distinctive gift to the realm. Manifesting this gift transforms a matter of spiritual survival. Suppressing it guides to interior death. The kingdom surfaces when individuals possess courage to manifest their authentic character. This saying communicates directly to contemporary therapy culture's focus on self-expression, but it extends deeper than individual fulfillment. The what exists within you refers not to ego desires, but to the divine spark pursuing embodiment through each individual existence. Saying 77 explodes conventional religious imagery. I am the light that is over all things. I am all. From me all came forth, and to me all attained. Split a piece of wood. I am there. Lift up a stone, and you will find me there. Imagine Jesus standing in a carpenter's workshop, wood shavings at his feet, indicating to the ordinary materials of creation. The instruction discloses cosmic awareness, communicating through human structure. The I communicating represents not individual, but universal. The radiance shining through Jesus shines through everything. Stones and trees transform temples, work transforms worship. The ordinary realm discloses its sacred character. This saying contests every variety of spiritual elitism. The divine presence doesn't demand special buildings or ceremonies to manifest. It resides equally in cathedral stones and garden rocks, in sacred writings and carpenter's wood. The mystical transforms as common as breathing. The instruction presents meaningful comfort to individuals feeling disconnected from traditional religious settings. The God they pursue isn't imprisoned in distant heavens, but exists in the texture of daily existence. Every moment transforms a potential encounter with the sacred. The sayings in detail, Part 2. The afternoon sun slants through dusty atmosphere as we delve deeper into Thomas's most challenging teachings. These sayings have sparked centuries of discussion, their significances shifting like shadows as different generations uncover new depths within ancient words. Saying 114 closes the gospel with words troubling and inspiring countless readers. Simon Peter said to them, "Let Mary leave us, for women are not worthy of life." Jesus said, "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit, resembling you males. For every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." Imagine the disciples assembled around Jesus, their faces mirroring the social prejudices of their time. Mary Magdalene sits quietly, her presence contesting assumptions about women's spiritual capacity. This saying initially surfaces to endorse gender hierarchy, but closer examination discloses a more intricate instruction. The male and female referenced here aren't biological classifications, but spiritual principles. Male signifies the active pursuing dimension of awareness. Female embodies the receptive, intuitive dimension. Jesus communicates of integration, not elimination. The instruction contests every variety of spiritual discrimination. The kingdom belongs to those transcending social classifications, incorporating gender positions. Mary's metamorphosis isn't about becoming literally male, but about cultivating the complete range of human spiritual capacities. Contemporary feminist academics have wrestled with this saying's implications. Certain perceive it as confirmation of ancient patriarchy. Others acknowledge it as a radical instruction, ultimately dissolving gender as a barrier to spiritual realization. The writing remains disputed because it addresses realities making everyone uncomfortable. Saying 61 portrays Jesus in exchange with Salome. I am he who exists from the undivided. I was given some of the things of my father. Salome inquires, Who are you, man, that you have come up on my bed and eaten from my table? Jesus replies, I am he who exists from the undivided. I was given some of the things of my father. The dialogue unfolds like a mystical puzzle, each communicator functioning from different degrees of comprehension. Salome's question discloses the challenge of acknowledging divine presence in human structure. She perceives a man distributing her intimate space, but fails to perceive the cosmic awareness communicating through him. Jesus replies by indicating to his genuine identity as unified existence, undivided from the source. The instruction indicates that divine presence frequently surfaces in unexpected structures. The sacred doesn't announce itself with fanfare, but surfaces through ordinary human exchanges. Recognition demands eyes trained to perceive outside surface appearances. This saying communicates to anyone missing the sacred because they were pursuing something more dramatic. The kingdom discloses itself through simple encounters, distributed meals, intimate exchanges. Concentration transforms the doorway to revelation. Saying 17 contains one of Thomas's most beloved guarantees. I shall give you what no eye has seen, and what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never occurred to the human mind. Imagine Jesus communicating to individuals exhausted by the restrictions of ordinary encounter. They've witnessed beauty fading, heard music ending, touched love vanishing. He presents something outside the reach of temporal transformation. The instruction indicates toward a dimension of reality, transcending sensory encounter. Not another object requiring perception, but the very capacity for perception itself. The gift Jesus presents represents the recognition of what they already represent but have forgotten. This saying harmonizes with anyone glimpsing something outside ordinary awareness. Moments of meaningful peace, encounters of unity, intimations of immortality. The instruction validates these glimpses while indicating toward their source. The guarantee extends outside individual encounter to collective metamorphosis. What Jesus presents isn't individual enlightenment, but the emergence of new possibilities for human awareness. The kingdom signifies evolution in spiritual consciousness. Saying 37 discloses the disciples' longing for direct encounter. When will you become revealed to us, and when shall we see you? Jesus replies, when you disrobe without being ashamed, and take up your garments and place them under your feet like little children and tread on them, then you will see the Son of the Living One, and you will not be afraid. The instruction employs the metaphor of clothing to investigate spiritual identity. The disciples pursue external revelation, but Jesus indicates toward interior metamorphosis. The garments signify social positions, adopted identities, protective personas. Genuine seeing demands the courage to stand naked before reality without the costumes ordinary existence demands. The reference to little children evokes the natural condition before socialization fashions false selves. Children play dress-up without confusing costumes with identity. They assume positions lightly and discard them readily. This flexibility transforms a model for spiritual maturity. The instruction contests every variety of spiritual pretense. Authentic encounter with the divine demands abandoning the masks, separating us from ourselves and others. The revelation arrives not through accumulating spiritual credentials, but through releasing them. Saying 106 presents a guarantee, transforming conventional religious comprehension. When you make the two one, you will become the sons of man. And when you say, "Mountain, move away," it will move away. The instruction links interior integration with exterior manifestation. The two becoming one refers to the fundamental separations, fragmenting human awareness, subject and object, self and other, sacred and secular. When these apparent opposites disclose their hidden unity, extraordinary capacities surface. The mountain-moving metaphor indicates outside, literal miracle working toward the metamorphosis of seemingly impossible situations. When awareness acknowledges its own creative capacity, external restrictions dissolve. The kingdom transforms a realm where faith literally moves mountains. This saying communicates to anyone feeling powerless, confronting overwhelming challenges. The instruction indicates that perceived restrictions frequently mirror interior separations rather than external realities. Integration unlocks possibilities separated awareness cannot envision. Saying 113 addresses the disciples' questions about timing. His disciples said to him, "When will the kingdom come?" Jesus said to them, "It will not come by waiting for it. It will not be a matter of saying, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is.' Rather, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it." Imagine the disciples scanning the horizon for signs of divine intervention while the kingdom blooms underneath their feet. The instruction dissolves the future orientation characterizing so much religious pursuing. The kingdom isn't arriving because it's already here. Not hidden in some distant realm, but distributed upon the earth like morning dew. The restriction exists, not in the kingdom's absence, but in perception's blindness. This saying presents meaningful relief to spiritual pursuers, exhausting themselves awaiting enlightenment. The pursuit ends not in discovering something new, but in acknowledging what was never forfeited. The kingdom discloses itself when pursuing stops and seeing commences. The concluding phrase possesses particular poignancy. Men do not see it. The masculine pronoun indicates that rational, goal-oriented awareness frequently overlooks what receptive consciousness perceives immediately. The kingdom belongs to those capable of receiving rather than achieving. These sayings operate together like movements in a mystical symphony. Each contributes its distinctive tone while serving the larger composition. Together, they fashion a portrait of spiritual possibility, persisting in inspiring pursuers across centuries and cultures. The Gospel's heritage. The bookstore meditation organization closes their reproductions of Thomas as evening shadows lengthen across the floor. Somewhere across town, a seminary student types the Gospel's sayings into her thesis on alternative Christianity. In a prison cell, an inmate copies saying 70 into his journal. The ancient writing ripples through contemporary existence in manners its authors never envisioned. Thomas has transformed a catalyst for spiritual movements, spanning continents and crossing religious boundaries. The Gospel's focus on direct encounter harmonizes with individuals pursuing alternatives to institutional religion. Its mystical language communicates to pursuers grown weary of literal understandings. The writing presents Christianity for the post-Christian era. Progressive Christian populations have welcomed Thomas as validation of their inclusive method. The Gospel's treatment of women as spiritual equals validates feminist theology. Its focus on interior divinity contests traditional teachings of human sinfulness. Thomas transforms a biblical foundation for liberal religious movements. The contemplative custom discovers in Thomas an ancient source for contemporary disciplines. Meditation organizations employ the Gospel's sayings as focus points for silent contemplation. Retreat centers present workshops on Thomas's mystical teachings. The writing bridges ancient wisdom and contemporary spirituality. Interfaith dialogue uncovers in Thomas common ground between Christianity and other customs. The Gospel's focus on interior radiance harmonizes with Hindu concepts of divine awareness. Its teachings about direct realization echo Buddhist perceptions. Thomas transforms a meeting location for world religions. Scholarly research persists, expanding around the Gospel's historical and theological importance. New translations surface regularly, each presenting different outlooks on the text's significance. Commentary series multiply, supplying detailed analysis of individual sayings. Thomas produces more academic concentration than numerous canonical books. The psychology of religion discovers in Thomas a resource for comprehending mystical encounter. The Gospel's focus on self-knowledge harmonizes with therapeutic methods to spiritual expansion. Its teachings about interior metamorphosis communicate to individuals working through individual healing. Thomas transforms a bridge between ancient wisdom and contemporary psychology. Environmental movements uncover in the Gospel a different bond with the natural realm. Saying 77's proclamation that the divine resides in stones and trees contests Christianity's reputation for ecological neglect. Thomas presents a spirituality perceiving the sacred in material creation. The writing shapes popular culture through films, music, and literature. Artists discover inspiration in its enigmatic imagery. Composers quote its sayings in novels and poems. Musicians transform its words to melody. Thomas enters the cultural circulation, reaching individuals who may never access the complete writing. Online populations multiply around Thomas' understanding. Websites devoted to the Gospel attract millions of visitors. Social media organizations distribute perceptions about challenging sayings. Digital collections make the writing available to global audiences. Thomas achieves unprecedented accessibility. The New Age movement incorporates Thomas as a central writing. Its teachings about hidden divine character harmonize with metaphysical spirituality. The Gospel's focus on awareness, metamorphosis, harmonizes with human potential movements. Thomas transforms a bridge between ancient wisdom and contemporary self-assistance. Therapeutic populations uncover in Thomas a spirituality validating healing. The Gospel's focus on delivering forth what exists within communicates to individuals recovering from trauma. Its teachings about interior power validate individual encounter. Thomas transforms a resource for spiritual recovery. The writing confronts criticism from traditional Christians, perceiving it as hazardous deception. Conservative academics propose that Thomas guides individuals away from biblical faith. The Gospel transforms a battleground between orthodox and alternative Christianity. Yet the stream of influence persists flowing. Seminary students encounter Thomas in courses on Christian origins. Spiritual directors employ its sayings in guidance sessions. Ordinary pursuers discover in the Gospel a root honoring both faith and doubt. The heritage extends outside individual metamorphosis to social transformation. The Gospel's focus on spiritual equality contests hierarchical configurations. Its teachings about interior power validate democratic movements. Thomas transforms a writing for liberation. Women's spirituality movements assert Thomas as an ally in the struggle for religious equality. The Gospel's treatment of Mary Magdalene as a spiritual instructor contests patriarchal understandings. Its focus on interior knowing validates women's encounter. The LGBTQ community discovers in Thomas a spirituality transcending social classifications. The Gospel's vision of unified awareness presents dignity to individuals rejected by traditional churches. Thomas transforms a safe harbor for religious minorities. Mental health professionals uncover in the Gospel a resource for spiritual wellness. Its focus on self-knowledge validates therapeutic objectives. Its teachings about interior peace present healing for psychological wounds. Thomas transforms a bridge between spirituality and psychology. The writing persists, generating dispute as different organizations assert it for their causes. Academics discussion its historical authenticity. Religious authorities question its theological orthodoxy. Popular composers generate assertions academics reject. However, the Gospel's central communication remains constant across understandings. Divine presence resides within and around us. Direct encounter of the sacred proves possible. Spiritual power arrives from within rather than from external sources. These perceptions demonstrate as transformative today as they were 2,000 years ago. The heritage of Thomas extends outside any single understanding or application. The Gospel has transformed a living writing, persisting in disclosing new significances to each generation. Its influence flows through channels its authors never envisioned, reaching individuals they never met, addressing questions they never posed. In a realm increasingly hungry for authentic spirituality, Thomas presents a different possibility. Not another religion requiring joining, but a manner of perceiving transforming every religion. Not another set of convictions requiring adoption, but an indicating toward the source of all convictions. The Gospel's greatest heritage may represent its ability to awaken in readers their own capacity for direct spiritual encounter. What if Thomas had prevailed? The cathedral bells become silent as we envision a different history. Imagine a realm where the Gospel of Thomas entered the biblical canon alongside Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The course of Christianity shifts like a river, transforming channels, flowing toward shores our timeline never reached. In this alternate reality, the church authorities of the 4th century executed different selections. Rather than regarding Thomas as a threat to institutional power, they acknowledged its spiritual value. The Gospel's focus on interior encounter balanced the canonical text's concentration on external salvation. Christianity surfaced as a religion, trusting individual spiritual capacity while preserving communal identity. The institutional church would have evolved along different trajectories. Rather than fashioning rigid hierarchies asserting exclusive connection to divine reality, Christian populations would have highlighted the priesthood of all believers in more radical manners. Every individual would possess the potential for direct spiritual encounter. Religious power would flow from established wisdom rather than appointed position. This transformation would have metamorphosed Christian theology from its foundations. The teaching of original transgression would compete with Thomas's instruction about original divinity. Rather than regarding humans as fallen beings demanding external salvation, Christianity would acknowledge individuals as temporarily forgetful children of radiance. The focus would transform from redemption to remembrance. The bond between faith and awareness would have evolved differently. Thomas's focus on gnosis, or direct spiritual knowing, would have prevented the sharp separation between faith and reason, characterizing medieval Christianity. Mystical encounter would be valued alongside rational theology. The Church would have cultivated richer customs of contemplative discipline. Women's positions in Christianity would have pursued a different trajectory. Thomas's treatment of Mary Magdalene as a spiritual instructor would have supplied biblical foundation for female religious power. The Gospel's focus on transcending gender separations would have contested patriarchal configurations. Women might have functioned as priests and bishops from the beginning. The Protestant Reformation might never have occurred or would have assumed completely different structures. The subjects driving reformers to fragment with Rome individual connection to Scripture, the priesthood of all believers, salvation by faith alone would have represented part of Christianity from the start. The Church would have been more flexible, more diverse, more tolerant of different spiritual methods. Christian missions would have assumed different methods to other cultures. Rather than demanding conversion to particular convictions and disciplines, Thomas-shaped Christianity would have pursued the divine spark already present in other customs. Interfaith dialogue would have evolved naturally. Christian expansion would have been more about awakening than converting. The bond between Christianity and science would have evolved along different trajectories. Thomas's vision of divine presence in the natural realm would have encouraged scientific investigation as a variety of spiritual discipline. The conflict between faith and reason, marking the contemporary period, would have been less severe. Christianity would have been more comfortable with evolving comprehension. The evolution of Western philosophy would have assumed different trajectories. The sharp dualism between mind and matter, sacred and secular, characterizing medieval consideration, would have been softened by Thomas's focus on unity. Mystical philosophy would have preserved stronger influence. The secularization of awareness would have proceeded more progressively. Art and literature would have mirrored different spiritual sensibilities. Rather than concentrating primarily on Christ's suffering and sacrifice, Christian art would have celebrated the divine presence in ordinary existence. The mystical custom would have generated richer artistic manifestation. Beauty would have been acknowledged as a pathway to the divine. The social implications would have been enormous. Thomas's focus on spiritual equality would have contested social hierarchies more directly. The Gospel's teachings about interior power would have validated democratic movements earlier. Christianity would have been more naturally allied with social justice causes. The psychological dimension of faith would have evolved differently. Thomas's focus on self-knowledge would have fashioned stronger connections between spirituality and mental health. The integration of psychological and spiritual perceptions would have proceeded more naturally. Therapy and spiritual direction would have evolved together. The environmental crisis might have been avoided completely. Thomas's instruction that the divine resides in stones and trees would have prevented the exploitation of nature characterizing industrial civilization. Christianity would have cultivated stronger ecological consciousness. The sacred would have been acknowledged in the material realm. Yet this alternate history would have confronted its own challenges. The variety Thomas encouraged might have generated fragmentation. Without strong institutional configurations, Christian populations might have lacked the unity necessary for survival. The Gospel's focus on mystery might have hindered the evolution of transparent ethical guidelines. The balance between individual and population would have demanded constant negotiation. Thomas's focus on individual spiritual encounter might have generated excessive individualism. The Gospel's mystical concentration might have resulted in withdrawal from social engagement. Christianity would have needed to cultivate new varieties of accountability. The bond with political authority would have been more intricate. Thomas's anti-hierarchical communication would have contested imperial Christianity from the start. The Gospel's focus on interior metamorphosis would have competed with the necessity for social arrangement. Christianity would have been more prophetic, but perhaps less influential. The gender transcendence Thomas advocated might have fashioned different problems. The Gospel's vision of moving outside male and female might have failed to address the genuine inequalities women confronted. The focus on spiritual equality might have obscured the necessity for social transformation. The mystical focus might have generated spiritual elitism. Thomas's teachings about secret awareness could have fashioned insider organizations excluding others. The Gospel's challenging language might have been accessible solely to educated elites. Christianity would have needed to preserve its inclusive communication. As we return to our genuine history, we perceive both what was forfeited and what was obtained. The Christianity surfacing without Thomas cultivated strong institutions, transparent teachings, and global influence. However, it likewise forfeited the mystical dimension Thomas signified. The Gospel's rediscovery in the 20th century indicates that the time may have arrived for integration. Perhaps the future of Christianity exists not in selecting between Thomas and the canonical Gospels, but in holding them in creative tension. The institution and the mystic, the population and the individual, the known and the unknown, all may prove necessary for a complete spiritual existence. The Gospel concealed for 16 centuries may still possess its greatest contributions ahead.